Welcome back to the Crucial Combo podcast. You are tuned into your gracious host, Kojo Afriye. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for being on the channel. If you have not hit the subscribe button, hit that. We're still building the channel and having these crucial conversations. So there's a lot going on in the world as always. So I want to tackle a couple of things in this show and just kind of dig into a couple of topics. I want to talk about manhood, and I want to talk about feminism a little bit. First of all, before I even get started, I got to big up because I know a couple of episodes back, I did a whole episode where I was kind of going in on Michelle Obama because I was kind of disappointed on the things she was saying about Barack Obama. And I was disappointed up till very recently. Now, I'm sure unless you're living under a rock or maybe you just don't watch her podcast, but she did, as everyone predicted. I knew at some point she was going to have Barack Obama on there. They had a long conversation. A lot of people have been talking about different aspects of this episode where he was on there with her and obviously her brother Craig, who's the co-host. Now, one of the things I thought was really cool is that they talked about, Barack talked about his upbringing without having his father present. They talk a little bit about fatherhood or manhood, and that's what I'm going to kind of play. I'm going to play a clip of that and then talk about it a little bit. But I do have to give props to Michelle for having him on there at least. And at least, I don't know if it quells the divorce rumors. And again, whether they're getting divorced, not being together, it ain't my business. I really don't care. My issue episodes back was the fact that I felt like she was chipping away at their legacy, their presidential legacy. What they do personally, I don't really need to know. It ain't my business. But I mean, I do feel like as a presidential legacy, you have to hold things in a certain way. And I felt like Michelle Obama was chipping away at that a little bit. But anyway, she had Barack on there. I want to play this clip. I want to talk a little bit about manhood because we're having this conversation about manhood. And I think the two big topics right now, as far as male, female, outside of relationships, right, are manhood. What does it mean in today's world? How has it changed, right? And then later I'm going to talk a little bit about quote unquote feminism and what that means and how it's changed. So let me get into this clip with Barack.
Later on, as I got older, you'd start recognizing that some of the ideas about manhood that were being given to us back in the 70s and the 80s, not all of them were great. Right.
Can I ask you both to talk about what manhood meant for you? What it meant for you when you were little boys coming up, what you thought it was, and what you then came to understand it to actually be?
Well, I don't remember maybe when I was a really young child, other than the idea that guys were strong, they didn't whine, they were tough.
They were expected to go to work.
They worked
and provide,
right,
and protect.
Yes,
I mean, and I think back about Dad. I think when I'm thinking about Dad as a role model, I remember the fact that here you have a man who has MS. And he's getting up and he's going to work absolutely every day.
Right.
And he is not complaining. That's another thing. Men didn't complain.
You don't complain.
Then.
You're stoic.
You were, I love that word, stoic. Coach Carmody used to use that all the time, stoic. But our dad never complained. He never got up. He had a sense of humor. That was another thing.
It's interesting. Now, one part that Barack said that he thought that was negative was you don't whine and you don't cry. Now, here's the thing. I think that young boys, right? Young boys are going to whine and cry because they are children. True, right? And, everybody's subjective. What age should that stop and you become a young man? It's different for everybody, But I do think it's not negative necessarily to tell young boys they shouldn't whine and cry. I think that young boys who are becoming young men, what I mean by young men is maybe 10 years old and older. My son is close to that age. And, when you're becoming preteen, you're a young man going into teenage years. You're going to be a young man who will eventually be a man. And crying and whining is not a good thing, because and again, I'm not talking about children, but what I'm saying is that one of the things about being a man that I think has changed over time, and they did mention things like, yeah, men should be working, you should be productive, right? Men, I don't think that men are necessarily supposed to be stoic and not have any emotion, but men are supposed to be able to handle themselves, right? So when we talk about whining and crying, I'm a proponent of not having boys whining and crying. Why is that, right? Whining and crying to me implies that you're not able to emotionally handle when you don't get what you want, right? And if you're talking about a boy, again, I understand that. But when we start talking about young men, one of the biggest things for men that men have to prepare themselves is mentally, to be able to handle yourself mentally. Because if you're going to whine and cry because things don't go your way, then you will not be able to handle yourself, because in life, things don't always go your way. In fairness, I do think boys should be able to express their emotion, but I think there's kind of a push to make boys and girls the same, and boys and girls are not the same, right? And I'm not saying that girls should whine and cry either. There's just a different, I'll get to that in a second. There's a difference between boys and girls, and kind of the way I think that boys and girls process things, and just in general as humans, when we go from children to adults, right? There's a lot of transition mentally that people nowadays are not getting, because everybody wants to be a child forever, in my opinion.
At its best, it then counterbalanced the idea of being strong, right? Like, you're strong not to pick on people, right? Not to be a bully, not to dominate others. Instead, it's strength in order to protect, right? And for me, a lot of being a man was being self-sufficient, right? The idea of I can handle myself and make my way through the world. And I tell this story, you've heard this story, and sometimes people kind of freak out. Fairly early on, because
yes, I do freak out over
because
this.
I was living in Indonesia. I'd fly from Hawaii to Indonesia on my own if I was visiting my grandparents, even at the age of 8. Yeah, and it was cool because stewardess was there. She
didn't walk them to the gate. Just
at
the airport.
Loved me to death.
But there are, the story you tell is the story of probably most kids.
A lot of kids.
Across the country. Yeah. If, you're a single parent, you don't have somebody at home, a lot of kids are, they got to get up, make their own breakfast, find their way. They're doing that every day because there isn't an alternative.
Correct. And figuring out what that balance is.
That's exactly the point. What is the balance?
It's tough.
Which is very different from how we parented our kids, how Kelly is, and you and Kelly are parenting your younger sons now.
Part of it, don't you think, part of it was also time specific, in the sense that when we were coming up, the idea of kids just being out and having adventures and just getting home in time for dinners, especially during the summers, right? Part of what happened, and I maybe affected boys a little more than girls, I don't know, is that freedom, that sense of being able to build up resilience and a sense of competence and a sense of I can manage the world around me because the stakes weren't so high. When I think about kids now on the South Side, same neighborhoods where you guys grew up, but the chances of possibly getting shot or the chances of, some other terrible thing happening are higher. And I think that affected everybody's parenting, and it affected how we handle kids, right? So that now suddenly, instead of just saying, all right, get out of here and come back for dinner time, now it's a play date. And where are you? And Do we know the parents where you're
Yeah.
playing?
As far as boys, like when he talks about, when I was growing up, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And we just went outside and we were all over the place. And there was a big part of learning how to be a man, or manly things as far as just handling yourself, because you're just out there playing with different kids, different personalities. Some people are nice, some people are mean. There's different experiences as you're running around as a kid, and socially you learn a lot of things socially, right? And I think that's affected boys and girls the same, because he's right. Nowadays we don't, if you have any kids in 2025, you're not just letting them be like, all right, go outside, I'll see you later. That those days are just over. For boys, I think that the mental part of it, as far as how to handle yourself and for conflicts, how to handle yourself in any situation that takes some level of resiliency, determination. I think a lot of that is missing, because when you look at the kids now who are in their 20s, who are, mainly committing a lot of the crimes and shooting up and killing their people over every little thing, it's a lot of it's because they did not have that level of guidance to the point, through their teenage years. So I think we're not allowing ourselves to admit boys and girls are different, and actually raising them to say, here's some principles as a young man that you should have, right? For instance, because we want boys to be emotional, right? Because we want them to be emotional, and we don't, it's like we're overcorrecting is what is happening. Because we want boys to show their emotion, now you have a lot of grown men who are wanting to show their emotion over every little thing. You have to be able to emotionally be stronger than a woman, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? If I sound misogynistic, I'm sorry, but as a man, you have to be mentally stronger as far as how to handle yourself. And I'm not saying that women are not mentally strong. I'm just saying that men need to be able to handle themselves and not fall apart all the time when things happen. The roof could cave in. It might be a flood. The wall could cave in. Whatever the case is, as a man, you have to be able to contain yourself, figure out a solution, and get to it. And I'm not saying women are like that too, but I'm just saying as a man, men should be able to do that as a man unequivocally. That's my thing. 2, you need to be able to protect yourself. You need to be able to defend yourself, right? 3, you can't be a follower. You can't be following people who are going off in the wrong road. And we're all human beings, so we all get influenced, right? I like the fact they're talking about manhood, and I like the fact that Barack went on there. So I give him a lot of kudos as an ex-president to really go on there and speak, candidly about his own situation. Now, there has been a little bit of controversy, because I know I didn't play the clip, but they're talking about certain parts where he talks about, I guess one of his role models was gay or whatever, but that, it's neither here nor there. For me, it is what it is. There's a lot of different people you meet throughout your life, as a man. And I do think that if you do not have a father, you may have different role models in your life, but role models are really just, I would say men who have a good head on their shoulders and who have some level head to teach you how to maneuver through life and how to deal with challenges in your life. And I think that's one of the biggest things we have going on now. Now, as far as the human capital part of it is, if we don't have something for men to do, this is where the problem comes into play. I want to play a clip from Charleston White. He was on Patrick Bet-David's show, PBD podcast, and it's an uncomfortable truth when you get into culture and the subculture of rap and hip hop. I was heavily involved as a producer, a rapper. I'm still a sound engineer and all of that. And a lot of the stuff I listened to growing up, now as a grown man with children, now I look back and I'm like, luckily I've lived a good life thus far, relative to others. I've lived a pretty good life. And but I say to myself, were people really influenced to really do the wrong thing, to end up dead or in jail, selling drugs or whatever it is? Were people influenced to have kids or to risk their lives in different ways from music? Charleston White is a wild dude. Let me say that first before I even play this clip. Charleston White is a wild dude. So He's made his way on the internet saying, now I don't agree with a lot of stuff Charleston White said. He say a lot of crazy stuff, but you know what? A lot of people who say crazy stuff, they actually make sense in a lot of ways too. So he said a lot of things I actually agree with. And anyway, let me play this.
Man, when I got introduced to what I call, I'm the seed of America's gangster rap culture. A little kid who been watching Bill Cosby, Red Fox, Fred Sanford. When my uncles get out of prison, I watched all the black exploitation films. From Dolomite, Superfly, all penitentiary. So I learned criminal activity from watching these movies, watching my uncles. And once I finally got to go out into the community, imagery have already been propagated to me. Kid watching television, kid watching. So I'm mimicking what I'm seeing. So I've never seen a man come out of my mother's bedroom. I've also never seen a man get up and go to work.
You've never seen a man come out of your mama's bedroom? You've never seen a man go
to work? Yeah, I didn't know men work. I thought men were like my Uncle Curtis and my Uncle Wayne. They pimp on a woman, or they lay around all day, or earn their clothes in the middle of the day, wake up late with a joint in their mouth, fly clean, and go nowhere. The unproductive black male of the 80s. So that's what I saw. So I watched all the males in my family go to prison. For my mom's cousins, my uncles, grandmother's brothers, and I never heard anybody say anything bad about prison. So think about this. I never hear anybody say anything bad about prison. They come home and make it sound bravado. Like you're missing out on something. As if for rite of passage. Not only that, you're seeing it on television. So it's being reinforced either way. So we had a whole black exploitation era. So by the time, I'm an injured kid who get to watch all the television in the world in the hospital, at home. We had a VC. Yeah. So by the time I get to be a normal kid that can go outside and play, it's a new culture, gang culture. And it's trending. I remember we seen colors our first summer. We went and got bandanas and put them in our pocket. I went and got me a pocket knife.
Now, why am I playing this clip? Like I said, Charleston White is a wild guy, as far as some things he says, but there's a lot of truth there, and it's hard to deny it. To be honest with you, because I remember, in my like junior high years and all that stuff, when you started seeing boys in the hood and menace to society and all these different things, how you process things are so important, right? So yeah, I think that young men are definitely influenced, because we all just human beings at the end of the day. Girls and boys are influenced by things, but I think that the concept of manhood, when he talks about growing up and not seeing a lot of men around him working, it's a sad situation. And the crack epidemic of the 80s was wild, and the 90s was crazy too. And not seeing men working is definitely a negative thing. But I think overall, the imagery of manhood, and we can talk about, black malehood, but right now I'm just talking about manhood in general. I think young boys are now growing up trying to figure out, well, what does it really mean to be a man? What does it mean? And everybody's telling you what it's supposed to mean. There's women who are telling men what men are supposed to be, and there's men who who are men trying to tell men what men are supposed to be. So it's definitely a time where, again, if you have sons, I think that what you really want to do, what young boys, you have to give them a sense of purpose. The whole idea of gangs and gang culture really comes from two issues. It's lack of guidance, lack of purpose, right? And I would put poverty second, to be honest with you. I don't even believe that poverty is the number one. A lot of people would say poverty is the reason for gangs, but there's a lot of people who join gangs who are, even Charleston White is saying he didn't grow up poor. He grew up in a house, and he went to go hang out with the kids in the project because he wanted to relate to them. But it's not being poor so much. It's every human being, the biggest thing that human beings have is this need for belonging. And young males need it badly. If young males don't have a sense of belonging, they go off in a whole nother way. So, manhood, I think, is really just a thing where teaching young men to be rational, teaching young men to have a sense of confidence, some sense of purpose. You'll find your confidence in your sense of purpose. And that's why, now, like I said, you can't just let your kids just running around anymore, unfortunately. I wish that we lived in a world like that, but we just don't. So I think you got to make sure your sons are involved in things, whatever it's going to be, activities, sports, you got to keep them involved. And you have to and also, again, like I said, they have to be able to process things in a way that, helps them to say, oh, you know what? Okay, I'm not always going to get my way. I'm not always going to win. People aren't always going to do what I want them to do. That's a big lesson for boys, because when you grow up, as a man, you will handle yourself much better. Otherwise, again, like I said, you see all these young kids running around now who are basically not effeminate, but they have these they're emotionally imbalanced creatures. What my man saying, baby boy, emotionally imbalanced creatures. We have a lot of males who are like that as adults, and because they weren't raised as young men to say, you know what, you got to be able to handle yourself mentally. That's the number one thing. So let's go over to Candace Owens. She was on the Jubilee channel, and it's really interesting. It's like a debate. It's her versus 20 feminists. Now, feminism, I'm not going to deep dive into feminism. I want to talk about feminism based on what people think it is. Candace Owens recently, I think she has a book coming out. If it's not already out, it's coming out. It's called Fix Him a Sandwich. So Candace Owens, from her own words, she believes that women need to not work and need to, focus on having a family. Or what she says effectively is that women who do not have families, most women end up regretting it in the long run, right? Now, I'm not a woman, but I do tend to believe that there's some truth to that. You know what I'm saying? So people I've seen personally, and then things I've seen in the world. Does every woman want a family? No. Is every woman unfulfilled if she doesn't have kids? No. But I do think that's where we are wired to want family, and ultimately people are all trying to figure out, okay, is it my family or the career? My family or the career? And, most people are doing both. It's not one or the other, but everybody has to figure out how to balance these things. It's just the way, part of life. It's what adulting is, right? So let me go over to this. So it's her versus 20 feminists. I'm not going to play. It's a long episode, but I picked out one of the better debates she had with one of the females.
Okay, so currently women make up about 47% of the workforce. Mm-hmm. If this were the case and that women were just inherently unhappy or unfulfilled working and would just prefer to be at home, why don't they?
Because we've made that, due to prior feminist waves, nearly impossible, because now, which I believe that the reason that the government wanted women to enter the workforce is because it gave them an opportunity to tax a household twice. And so this goes back to what I was saying, is that there's a lot of financial pressure that is being exerted on young women to enter the workforce, and they do so blindly under this illusion that somehow entering the workforce is going to make you more fulfilled, like getting yourself into 6 figures of debt, going to college to then take on a career and be in debt and having to pay student loans while you make $35K is going to make you happier. And I'm saying that isn't actually true.
Okay, so I hear that.
Yeah.
At the same time, would you not agree that that women can both have a career and have children? I mean, you are actively doing that right now.
And I want to be very clear, because I am actively doing it right now. I would be someone that you would call an exception, because I get to work from home. I get to wake up in the morning. I don't have a boss, right? I don't have to go into the office from 9 to 5. I get to then therefore spend the entire morning with my children.
So you're an exception, and the 47% of women that make up our labor force are also an exception?
No, the exact opposite. So I'm trying to make it more realistic, because I think it's really bad form when people who are able to stay at home, right, and are able to start working at, 1:00 p.m. as I do, after being around their children, the children are running around all day, will then preach to you that every woman can have this. That's not the reality. The reality is that the overwhelming majority of people are stuck behind a desk all day, and they're not happy. They're not doing work that gratifies them at all. And at the same time, they're suspending.
Well, that's just what career you've chosen. But I think that the issue
Most
with
people
your
work a 9 to 5. I think that's
okay,
the
yes,
reality,
but
right?
if it's the job that is making them unhappy, then maybe they should have chosen a different career path and not the structure of the career itself. But my issue with this is that not only is it claiming that women can't both be mothers and have jobs, which we know to be true because millions of women do that. My mother does that. You are actively doing it right now. But it also is qualifying what every single woman in this country wants without any clear evidence. I mean, there's 169 million women in this country. How can you say that you know exactly what every woman secretly wants? Are you asking them?
That wasn't my claim that I secretly know what every single woman wants. I'm saying that if you measure up at the end of your life, what brought you more fulfillment, your career or children, raising children in your family, we will discover that, and there actually have been studies, people that have gone to people on their deathbeds, and the number one regret that people had was that they gave too much to their careers. And this includes men, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean,
all right, let me pause that for a minute. So I'm just looking at, they do fact checks during this debate. So it says that this is a sand fact check. According to top 5 regrets of dying by Bronnie Ware, too much work is the number 2 regret behind not living a life true to yourself. So I don't know if that's true, but look, at the end of the day, let's go back to some things that Candace said. So she was saying that one of the reasons why the U.S. government wanted women to get into the workforce is so that they could tax the households twice. That's an interesting take. And then she talked about, how, women are stressed out because they are going to school, collecting, most of the college debt or more college debt than males, and are not making the money. And I think that men and women alike, just the whole phenomenon of going to college, racking up student debt, that's a whole nother conversation that we talked about before on this channel. And that's just something that was a time specific thing that I think younger people are starting to pay attention to now. But in regards to women, Candace talks about, women being more stressed out, being in the workplace, chasing their career and not having children, and saying that, okay, at the end of the day, you're going to regret not having children. Now, the concept or her position as far as feminism, let me just make that clear. Her position with this panel is that feminism has caused women to prioritize career and self over family, and women end up regretting it. It's a long debate. She also talks about that women are obviously ending up alone and not being with, not having a family, not having a partner and stuff like that. And these are conversations that are nothing new on the internet, right? But what I think is fascinating about the conversation about feminism, there are 4 different there's 4 different stages of feminism. I didn't realize even feminism started in the 1800s. It actually started in the 1800s, and I was looking at it. Actually, they had 4 waves. So the 1800s, 1960s, 1990s, 1980s, 90s, and then of course today. Now, what feminism means, I'm not going to get deep into what it means, because I think that the word feminism is taken on a whole other meaning. Everybody calls everything feminism. Now, as someone who has a daughter, right? I think when you have kids, that's when you look at things a lot differently, right? So if you're a man and you say, well, let's say, for instance, Candace's position is that, like I said, her book is called Make Him a Sandwich. She thinks that women should not be in the workplace, right? And should just focus on raising the kids, right? And the male should just be in the workplace. That's what she wants to do, is effectively go back to the 1950s, right? And when you have, and she, by the way, Candace only has sons. She doesn't have a daughter. So when you have a daughter, like I have a daughter, she's young, but when she grows up, I say to myself, well, do I want her not to enter college? Do I want her not to work? And again, those are choices that she can make when she is an adult. But what I would want for her would be that, right? At the same time, I can't ignore the fact that there are a growing number of adults, namely women, who are postponing children, and that's fine, it's their choice, but are postponing children, and family and society has put a lot of pressure on women to they've made family a very kind of negative thing where you push it off to the very, very end. And it seems like you can't do both. And it seems like something that that encroaches on your freedom and stuff like that. So we can't pretend that's not a thing. Now, a lot of people in that debate with Candace talked about when it comes to men and women in the workplace, it talked about, if women were to not be in the workplace, well, the concept is as well, in today's cost of living, could most men pay everything, right? Because the cost to live is a lot different than what it was in the 1950s. I mean, 1950s, you were in a small house and one income paid everything. We are far from those days, right? But outside of that, I wanted to bring up the fact that, I believe, again, I'm not a woman, but I believe that women are would never be satisfied in today's society not working. I think work is good for women. I think work is good for men and women alike. So I think if a woman can stay home and that's something that the husband can provide and that's something the woman wants to do, that's cool too. But I do think that, women need to be in the workforce because as an autonomous human being, you need to have purpose. Like I said earlier, men have to have purpose, women have to have purpose. Where I think things are going astray, and that's why I wanted to bring up manhood and feminism, quote unquote. Where things are going wrong is that men and women have decided not to work with each other anymore. That's the problem. That's where I think the problem is. It's not that feminism is the issue. It's not that manhood is such a big issue. The problem is how men and women work together has started to change because everybody's very individualistic, and I think that's the problem. So do I think women should be at home? No, I honestly don't. I don't think so. Because again, when I think about it from all the females I know, my sisters and all the female friends I have, my wife, and I think about the younger people like my daughter, I'm like, it's not going to be good for them. I don't think it's good for a woman just to be at home and just raise children. What I do think is that if we find a balance, because again, you got to think back to the 50s. Just taking that time period, quote unquote, where the man was out of the house all the time working and the woman was home. You got to realize there was a lot of dads who were dads, but weren't dads. You know what I'm saying? Like they provided, but they just didn't really have a time to pour into their kids like that. They're like, yo, I'm going to work 6 days a week. We heard the stories where, the dad works 6 days a week. He's working and he don't really have time to really connect with his kids. Like, he's like, what's up? What's going on? You good? All right. I'm going to take a nap, or I'm about to eat dinner. The dads didn't have time to connect. So I think that's the other downside we don't talk about. It's a lot of cliche on the internet. Like, well, men should take care of everything and the woman should have the choice to just be home and chill. Yeah, that's a conversation for people, for people who have enough resources for that. But let's be honest, most people don't make the money for the one income to cover all the bills. It's just not realistic in today's times. But like I said, the real thing is that, you got to have a balance. Women need a taste. Women need to be out here working and doing things to be free adults and do their thing like they have been. Right. So I don't have a problem with that. And I think males need to do their thing too. But the problem is you can't legislate any of that. And culturally in America, I'm just talking about America right now, men and women have to work together. That's where the breakdown is. It's not so much a feminism thing. So when Candace, is talking about, well, women are stressed out because they're in the workplace, I think there's truth to that. But I don't think it's just because of that. I think the problem is that we have culturally turned feminism into anti-male. Right. We've turned family into something that is scaring women away. Women are being scared away because there's this idea that you're going to lose your freedom. You're going to lose your freedom. You're going to lose your freedom. And look, men and women alike lose a portion of their I can do whatever I want ism when you have a family. That's just part of the game.
Okay, then as a woman, what period of time do you want to go back to?
Just as a woman, I think that it was probably a better environment for women when we understood that raising our children was fulfilling.
But some women still do understand that.
Right.
And a lot of women, and I'm one of them. And I'm here advocating for you to be able to live the life that you want and for other women to be able to live the lives they want.
Do you have children?
No.
Okay. You have a career, I presume?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you work in? What field do you work in?
I do hair.
Okay. Wonderful. So I have both children and a career, as somebody pointed out. And so the fact that I'm saying that you will be infinitely more fulfilled at the end of the day by raising your children than you will be if you come home and you say, wow, I really crushed it dyeing somebody's hair today. What is it exactly that makes you angry about hearing that? Like, that's what I'm actually trying. I'm trying to get to the implicit revolution.
That's the thing, is that no one is
someone
angry.
mentions children.
No, see, no one's angry when you mention children. I get angry, I guess, when you mention that someone should have a children, or you're trying to impose a lifestyle onto people that you want to live, which I think is kind of funny because as someone who's anti-feminism, you practice it more than most women do. I mean, every time you get on your podcast, every time you collect a check, you're practicing feminism.
Okay. That's what you think.
No, that's what it is.
Actually,
because without feminism, you wouldn't be able to exist.
Yeah, people keep saying, I hate when people say that.
But it's just the truth.
It just shows that you haven't done the research to even understand where the feminism
or you don't know history.
Which was discovered. That's what I'm saying about you, because it means that you don't understand that a bunch of government officials in the CIA funded the feminist movement. So for all of your hatred for the patriarchy,
I'm so confused. So my question is it bad that they funded it or bad that it just happened?
Men wanted women to go into the workforce. The government, which had a lot of men, it was being.
Are you talking about because World War II occurred and we had to go to factories, and then when we left the factories, they forced us back into the homes?
That's not what I'm saying at all. So let me tell you what I'm saying, and then you can respond to it.
Go for it.
Gloria Steinem is considered to be a feminist icon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because she led these protests. She also had a bunch of music festivals. She got students involved. It is just a fact that Gloria Steinem was funded by the CIA. Okay.
We won't go into Gloria Steinem, but I have seen some information that says that she was funded by the CIA. But the truth always lies in the middle, and I think that's what the issue is, right? So, can you have it all? No, you can't have it all. There's not enough time to have it all. But can you have a balance, right? So I think that at the end of the day, the issue, again, it comes back to men and women aren't working together well. Because, at the end of the day, if you're a woman and you have a career, right, and you're working, and again, most women I know work and have children. I don't know a lot of housewives in 2025. It's just not the reality, right? So, like the woman said earlier, women make up about 46% of the workforce. So the term feminism is becoming something it's taking on its own whole other meaning. It's its own monster by itself. A woman just working isn't practicing feminism to me. It's just a woman being an adult and living up to her potential. But again, where the problem is that when we start to scare women from the biological aspect of wanting a family, this is where it becomes a problem. So I think Candace is partially right as far as culturally where we push women. We have pushed women to prioritize self over family, and a lot do regret it. It is what it is. People can get mad at it, but at the end of the day, it's the truth. There's a lot of women that grow to get to a point where they can't have children anymore, and they regret it because they put it off. And I think that, again, it goes back to once you have children. Like I have a daughter, so I would explain to her that, look, you want to pursue the things you want to pursue personally, but equally, you want to pay attention to this idea of having a family and moving forward. We are meant to be here, in my opinion. We're meant to be here to reproduce and keep the species going and keep our family names going. Does it mean everybody in the world should have kids? No. But what I'm saying is that that's a huge part of the human experience. So we got to stop pretending like it isn't. But it's somewhere in the middle. And where you find the balance to have everything, quote unquote, or have most of what you want, is you got to be able to find someone you could work with. You got to be able to find a partner you can work with. And that's where the issue is. I think women and men alike. But if we're talking about women are encouraged to not work with a man. They're encouraged not to work with somebody. They're encouraged to have, do you, be you, get yours, whatever you have is yours. And that's where I think it becomes dangerous. We got to encourage young men and women to work together. Otherwise, none of this stuff works. So when Candace talks about, you can't go back to the 1950s, that's not going to ever work. Because at the end of the day, there, it takes away from all the things that women are, right? But at the same time, we can't keep going forward where, we have this underlying message in culture that is pushing women away from family too. That's dangerous also. So it's somewhere in the middle. So what we're going to do, I'm going to play a quick clip of Anthony Davis. You know what? I'm not even going to get into that. Honestly, I'll get into it the next show because I want to talk about that in a larger context as far as the human capital in America. But, let me know what you guys think. I think that Candace's point of view as far as feminism is a little extreme. And I think a lot of the people that's debating her don't fully understand. I would say they understand it, but they don't fully know how to respond as far as how things should be. Because again, like I said, you gotta have it somewhere in the middle, and a lot of these women who are debating her are not bringing up how it will, it's funny. A lot of the women who are debating her, none of them, I watched the whole hour and a half debate with all these different women, and nobody brought up how to partner with a man so all of that stuff does work like clockwork. Nobody brought that up, which was interesting to me. Everybody just talked about, well, you don't need to have kids, and women shouldn't go back home to to make sandwiches for men and all that. And I agree with that, but I think that the appropriate response, if I was on there, I would have said, Candace, I agree with some of your points as far as where society's gotten to today. However, we can't go back to women making sandwiches in the 50s. It ain't gonna work. It doesn't make sense. Economically, it doesn't make sense at all. And I don't think it's even best for the kids. It's not best for the dads because, like I said, with women working, it also created, in my opinion, a space for dads to be more involved in their children's lives because the woman isn't doing everything domestically. You know what I'm saying? Like the woman is doing some things domestically, the man is doing some things domestically, and they're both providing and all of that. And again, that's in an ideal world. That's how my wife and I do it, and I think that that's important. You got to have some level of balance. And the only way you have balance is if you work together. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. It's the Crucial Convo Podcast. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, hit that, and I'll holler at you next show. Peace.